I knew my sister despised me, but I never understood how far she would go until she pushed a birthday present across the table and laughed. A DNA test. Maybe this will explain why you're another man's mistake, she said loudly enough for every fork to freeze midair. I swallowed the humiliation, sent off the kit, and waited. Months later, our family's estate attorney called for an urgent meeting regarding Grace Ellington. My mother turned pale. Naomi's smile faded. And in that instant, I realized something chilling. They already knew what I was about to discover. Most people imagine family as a soft place to fall. Mine always felt more like a house with icy floors, lovely from the outside, freezing the moment you walked in. Growing up in the Ellington house in Denver, I learned early how to shrink myself. I was the quiet daughter, the one who finished her homework without being reminded, the one who melted into corners so my mother wouldn't sigh and my sister wouldn't curl her lip. Even then, Naomi's world seemed to revolve at the center of everything. She had a way of demanding attention without deserving it. Loud laughter, dramatic tales, a gift for turning every room into her stage. And my mother, Evelyn, applauded her every step. When Naomi earned a B on a test, she was well-rounded. When I brought home straight A's, Mom blinked like she'd briefly forgotten who I was before saying, "That's nice, Grace. Can you help set the table?" By the time I turned 35, I had built a life far from that house. Austin suited me: quiet mornings, simple habits, the kind of steadiness I'd never known as a child. I worked as a financial analyst, wore soft, neutral colors, and tried not to dwell on the constant ache that came from being the forgotten daughter. But when my father, James Ellington, died, the gravity of our family pulled me back. He had been the only stable thing in that house, a man of few words, but an unexpected warmth. In the small gestures, a hand resting on my shoulder, a proud nod at my college graduation. I didn't know then that he carried a secret, darker than anything I could have imagined. 3 months after the funeral, Mom insisted we have a small birthday dinner at the old house. Her voice on the phone was too cheerful, too rehearsed, as if she were reciting lines someone else had written for her. When I stepped through the front door, I smelled the familiar blend of lemon polish and aging books. The chandelier shone, but the house felt hollower without Dad's quiet presence. Naomi sat at the kitchen table, flipping through resort catalogs, bronzed from some recent getaway, barely looking up as I walked in. Mom poured herself more wine than usual, her hands trembling slightly. Something unsaid lingered in the air like a storm that hadn't broken yet. I tried asking about the will gently, respectfully. Mom stiffened, her smile tight. "We're just not ready yet," she said, but her eyes darted to Naomi, and Naomi grinned like she held a secret I didn't. Looking back, the dinner was never meant to celebrate my birthday. It was meant to prepare the stage for my humiliation. The tension that night didn't arrive in one sharp instant. It slipped in gradually, like a draft beneath a closed door. Every tiny detail felt wrong. Naomi kept glancing at me with that eager look, as if she were waiting for a signal only she and my mother had practiced. Mom's wineglass was never empty, though she hardly sipped from it. Her fingers just traced the stem again and again, like she needed something to steady herself. Dinner itself was theater. Naomi talked endlessly about her job, her husband, her plans to remodel her kitchen in a French farmhouse style. Mom laughed at every remark, even the ones that weren't funny. When I spoke, the room seemed to fade like someone lowered the volume of my existence. Halfway through the meal, Naomi leaned back, eyes shining. "So, Grace," she said sweetly, still working at that same firm in Austin. Before I could respond, she launched into another story about herself. It wasn't a question. It was a reminder: you are background noise. Still, something else simmered beneath her smug smile. Expectation, calculation. When Mom stood to bring out dessert, a small store-bought cake she hadn't even bothered to place on a proper plate. Naomi shoved back her chair with theatrical flair. Actually, she said, reaching for a sleek box wrapped in silver paper, I brought a birthday gift. Something I think you'll find enlightening. Mom's face lost all color. Naomi. But Naomi ignored her, sliding the box across the table toward me like it held proof instead of a present. Go on, she said, her smile thin as a blade. Open it. I tore away the paper, an odd stillness settling over me. Inside was a DNA testing kit. The room fell silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Naomi leaned closer, chuckling under her breath. Maybe this will explain why you're another man's mistake in this family. The words landed sharp and intentional. Mom flinched. I saw it, but she stayed quiet. The humiliation burned, but the fear in Mom's eyes felt like the real truth slipping through the cracks. Naomi hadn't merely insulted me. She had revealed something she wasn't meant to say out loud. Later that night, in my old bedroom, the walls still painted the pale blue I had chosen at 15. I rummaged through old boxes like someone searching for proof they had ever existed. At the back of my closet, I discovered an envelope that didn't belong with the rest. The dust around it had been disturbed not long ago. Inside was a photograph, a younger Evelyn holding me as a baby, while standing beside a man I didn't recognize. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, "Forgive me." My hands trembled as I photographed everything. Then I looked at the DNA kit Naomi had delivered like a weapon. She had wanted me to use it. She had wanted something to unravel. Fine. I mailed it the next morning, not because Naomi pushed me to, but because I needed to understand what truth she was so eager to turn into ammunition. The results arrived 5 weeks later on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk in Austin, half listening to the drone of the office vents when the notification flashed on my phone. I expected dread. What I didn't expect was clarity. Sharp, cold, undeniable. No biological relationship detected with the Ellington family. My breath caught, but I kept reading. A suggested match to the Hartman lineage, a name I had never spoken, never heard, suddenly bound to me by blood. It didn't ache the way I thought it would. It felt like confirmation of something I had always known deep down. I had been a guest in my own childhood, never truly a daughter. What unsettled me more came next. When I sent the results to our family group chat, nothing dramatic, just a screenshot and a simple question. Does anyone want to explain this? My phone buzzed almost immediately. Mom called in tears, not out of regret, but out of panic. Grace, sweetheart, please delete that. You don't understand. This is complicated. Things happened a long time ago. We moved past them. She never apologized. She never confronted the decades I spent feeling like an inconvenience in her home. She just pleaded with me to bury the truth again. But Naomi didn't call. She texted. Just 4 words. Well, now you know. Cold, satisfied, as if she had been waiting half her life for the moment I realized I didn't belong. That night, I called her, trembling with questions I didn't know how to form. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice laced with annoyance. Why, Grace? Why now? I demanded. Why push this? Why humiliate me? She laughed quietly, a sound that struck like frost. Because I've carried this family secret for 20 years. Because Mom owed me. Because you've played the victim long enough. And now the right people will finally get what they deserve. She hung up. Those words clung to me like smoke. The next morning, I began asking careful questions. I spoke to relatives, old friends, former neighbors, people who had known my parents before Naomi and I were born. What surfaced unsettled me. Naomi had been digging for months, meeting with estate attorneys, dropping hints about upcoming changes, speaking as if Dad's estate already belonged to her. I needed help. Real help. The kind Dad would have demanded I seek. So I hired an attorney, Sarah Ang, respected for handling complex inheritance battles. I brought her everything. The DNA results, the photograph, screenshots of Naomi's texts, the strange conversations, the tremor in Mom's voice. Sarah listened, her expression unreadable, jotting notes like she was piecing together a puzzle. Your instincts are correct, she said at last. This isn't just bitterness. Someone is constructing a case to remove you. 3 days later, I received the call that changed everything. Mr. Dalton, our longtime estate lawyer, sounded unusually rigid. Grace, your father left instructions for a will reading under specific conditions. Those conditions have now been satisfied. I think you should prepare yourself for what you're about to hear. Prepare? I doubt anyone could have been. The morning of the will reading, Denver felt colder than I remembered. Not a seasonal chill, but the kind that seeps into bone, the kind that feels like a warning. Sarah and I arrived early at the downtown building where Mr. Dalton's office occupied the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, dark wood, the sort of place where truths didn't hide. They reverberated. We selected seats near the window, out of direct line of fire. Sarah murmured, "Observe everything. Speak only when necessary." Her composed steadiness loosened the tightness in my chest. Mom arrived next. She looked drained, as if she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was hastily pinned back, and she gripped her purse with both hands as though it were the only thing holding her together. She didn't greet me, didn't even lift her eyes. She lowered herself into a chair at the far end of the table, staring at the polished surface as if it might swallow her whole. Then Naomi walked in. Her heels struck sharply against the marble floor, each step carrying a smug confidence that bordered on performance. She wore an expensive cream-colored suit, flawlessly tailored, and heavy makeup that made her appear sharper, colder. And of course, she brought her own attorney, a man I recognized from billboards boasting about aggressive estate litigation. Naomi offered me a slow smile, one corner raised higher than the other. "Grace," she said, as if acknowledging someone insignificant, but her eyes glittered with anticipation. She believed she had already won. Mr. Dalton entered last, holding a thick folder. He moved with the deliberate calm of someone who understood the weight of what he was about to reveal. When he reached the head of the table, he rested a hand on the folder and looked at each of us in turn. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to note that James Ellington left explicit instructions for how this reading should proceed. He anticipated complications. Everything I am about to disclose was prepared with full awareness of circumstances that some of you may find surprising." Naomi shifted, her smirk faltering. Dalton opened the folder and began reading the will. "I, James Robert Ellington, declare this my final will and testament. I leave 70% of my estate, including the family home, investment accounts, and assets, to my daughter, Grace Ellington." Silence cracked across the room like a whip. Naomi sprang to her feet. "She is not his daughter," she shouted. "We have DNA proof. She has no legal—" Dalton raised a hand. "Please sit. There is more." Reluctantly, she did, though her jaw tightened so fiercely I thought she might break a tooth. Dalton continued. "I have known since Grace was 2 years old that she is not my biological child. I chose to raise her regardless. I choose to leave her my legacy because she alone has proven worthy of it. This decision requires no further validation." Naomi's complexion drained to a sickly gray. Mom closed her eyes, pain tightening her features. But Dalton was not finished. 8 months before his death, Mr. Ellington hired a private investigator to document any attempts to manipulate or interfere with his estate. The investigator gathered significant evidence. He placed a stack of papers on the table. Payments, withdrawals, invoices, and meeting logs detailing Naomi Ellington's efforts to pressure her father into revising his will, including unauthorized withdrawals totaling $50,000 during his illness. Naomi's attorney stiffened. "We were not informed." Dalton cut him off. "You were not required to be." Additionally, the investigation documented consultations with 3 estate lawyers, discussions about upcoming changes to the family inheritance, and the purchase of a DNA test mailed to Naomi's home address and gift-wrapped. Naomi's eyes widened. "That's absurd," she said, her voice trembling. "That was a joke." Dalton placed the final document on the table, a handwritten note in my father's unmistakable handwriting. Mr. Ellington asked that I read this aloud. He unfolded the page. "Naomi, I know what you've been planning. I watched you attempt to manipulate your mother. I hoped you would make a different choice. These consequences are of your own making." A sound slipped from Naomi's throat. Half gasp, half snarl. Her attorney leaned closer to her. "Do not contest this," he muttered sharply. "There's a no contest clause. You will lose everything." But Naomi was unraveling. "This is fraud," she spat. "Grace manipulated him. She deceived a dying man." Sarah rose. Her voice was calm but commanding. "The will clearly acknowledges Grace's parentage and documents Mr. Ellington's reasoning. Any challenge would be frivolous and activate the no contest clause, including repayment of outstanding loans, approximately $200,000. Naomi's face contorted. "That's not a loan. He gave me that money." "Not according to the estate records," Dalton replied evenly. Mom finally spoke, her voice a fragile murmur. "Naomi, stop." But Naomi couldn't. Years of entitlement, resentment, and panic collided at once. "This should be mine," she hissed. "All of it. I'm the real daughter. I'm the one who stayed." I stood slowly, my tone steady. "You didn't stay, Naomi. You controlled. You threatened. You built your life on secrets you never earned." She turned toward me, wild-eyed. "You don't deserve—" "Grace," Dalton said gently. "There is something else your father left." He opened a smaller envelope addressed to me. Inside was a brief letter. "Grace, you spent your life believing you were unseen. You were not. I saw your strength, your compassion, your integrity. You were my daughter, not by blood, but by choice. And I leave you my legacy with complete certainty that you will honor it." My vision blurred. When I lifted my head, Naomi finally understood. This wasn't my triumph. It was her downfall crafted by the man she underestimated most. The legal aftermath moved faster than anyone expected. Naomi's attorney withdrew the following morning, leaving her scrambling for someone willing to take a case already collapsing under its own weight. When she tried to contest the will anyway, the judge dismissed it. Within minutes, the no contest clause held firm, the evidence undeniable. Her inheritance disappeared. The loan she'd taken from Dad, $200,000, converted into personal debt owed back to the estate. And the $50,000 in unauthorized withdrawals, she was given 1 year to repay or face further legal consequences. For the first time in my life, Naomi looked small. Not humbled, just trapped by consequences she'd always managed to escape. Mom came to see me a week later. She sat on my Austin apartment couch, hands clasped, eyes rimmed red. She told me everything the truth about my biological father. The agreement made decades earlier, the guilt she carried but never faced. I listened, but I didn't reach for her. Some wounds required distance, not closeness. "I want to make things right," she whispered. "I believe you," I said. "But making things right begins with letting me live without carrying your secrets." In the months that followed, I stepped away from Denver entirely. I managed the estate with Sarah's guidance, settled accounts, and chose quietly, deliberately, the life I wanted next. It was the first time I made a decision without wondering who it might disappoint. I left Denver behind and built a quieter life in Oregon where the lies could no longer reach me. Some endings aren't loud. They're choosing peace over pain. And if you've ever been the overlooked one, know this. You deserve better than the people who failed to see you.